Hi everyone, and welcome back to my No Buy Year. My name is Alexa, and today's video is going to explore the kind of internal hypocrisy of a no buy. I feel like I've been talking about this a fair amount lately, where the no buy and consumer trends are kind of hypocritical in nature just because everybody has to consume to live. People have needs as well as wants, and one person's needs are not going to look identical to another's. So I guess the main kind of goal for myself is to find the point of relative equilibrium where I feel good about my level of consumerism at the end of this no-buy challenge. And I have a framework of how to proceed in a way that feels responsible and conscious for myself. It's like the no-buy has been a set of training wheels that I've put onto this bicycle of conscious consumerism, and at the end of the year or at the end of the challenge period, I'll take them off and hopefully be able to ride without them. And, well, hopefully I managed to do that without having a lot of accidents and scrapes on the way as a result of diligently studying all the theory of riding this bicycle during the no-buy year, while I still have the training wheels on. Another way to put it is that among the levels of extremes, and I'm going to use these categories of overconsumption being associated with romanticizing your life and aspiring to acquisition versus kind of being a minimal monk and not having more than you need, and in fact kind of going the more stoic ascetic route. So we have these kind of two areas, and my question of the day, or today's pondering, is where am I going to land in the middle of that spectrum? To examine this question together today, I wanted to kind of present a series of dichotomies or spectrums. And none of these scales that I'm about to present need to translate to consuming or buying, but rather, at least today, they're just going to provide some food for thought together in this community. And some of these will be ideas that I've spoken about on this channel before. Some of them may be ideas that I'm about to speak on or will speak on in the future, and some of them might seem very obvious, but again, when stacked up against the other spectrums to explore, might just provide another level of nuance. So we have those two extremes of the minimal monk and the overconsumer. We have the attitude that things are just objects, things are just material, there's not really much meaning, versus things are beautiful and full of meaning. We have the idea that everything is trash, and the way of thinking that when we are no longer here, everything will be literal trash, and we could focus on that. Or we can look at things like coveted items, things to aspire to save for, to want, to desire. And kind of by extension, we can look at life in a more practical, unromantic way versus trying to romanticize even the smallest of daily tasks. Here I want to take a little break and pause in the sharing of spectrums to say that I do also think that there is some romanticization to be had in the life of a monk. And perhaps it's the Stoic philosophy that does romanticize this. Or maybe it's romanticizing the idea of simplicity. And I will share that I am attracted to some aspects of the minimalist life. Perhaps the simplicity, the emphasis on practicality, and some emphasis on form, if we consider minimalist style. And I have been attracted to that for quite some time. I've been consuming the minimalist content for years. And even during those years, I was still consuming stuff and wanting stuff at a rate that was nowhere near the rate that would have minimalist results, unless you consider massive declutters resulting in minimalism as part of a cycle, which I ideally do not. I don't consider that minimalist behavior or identifying with minimalist values. Ideally, the minimalist goal would be to not bring in an excessive amount of things that then need to be let go of in the first place. But where I'm at now is, having brought in all of these things, I will likely continue to keep most of those things. And therefore, I'm not sure that I will necessarily align with the minimalist values of not keeping more than you need. I have talked a little bit about this before, so this is just kind of a different way of presenting this awareness. So back to the romanticization of minimalism in the monk life. I would say as well, and I think I have said before, that doing a no-buy challenge kind of artificially places you at the end of these spectrums. So it kind of puts me more towards the things are just objects, everything is trash, unromantic, monk mode life. As far as the acquisition of new things goes anyway. It doesn't necessarily apply to the things one already has. Although I do think it will kind of lean in that direction if one is doing any of the reflection of why we acquired all these things in the first place. The natural next step is to try to use these things up and get the enjoyment that we envisioned when we purchased them. And again, that brings up the next kind of Venn diagram spectrum of the use value of things being in purpose, practicality, and the use value of things being in beauty. And like I said, I do think this is more of a Venn diagram where there's a middle section where there can be useful items that are also beautiful. And this is kind of the ideal, is the middle of the Venn diagram, at least in my opinion. I would like to pursue things that are beautiful and useful, that have considered the form as well as the function, that are kind of based in craftsmanship as well as use value. There's a couple of other kind of contrasting values and ideals that have come up for me this year, and I've made them alliterative as well, just for fun. So we have the ideas of compulsion versus contentment, impulse versus intention, and attention versus authenticity. So I would say that the first couple of those, the compulsion versus contentment, impulse versus intention, are kind of in the same vein, where we're thinking about our behavior in a different way. We're trying to pursue a more calm, internally, point of homeostasis, where we are content and we can take the time that it requires to be intentional, to gather the knowledge, to get our priorities and values clear for ourselves, to have clarity, I guess. Clarity versus compulsion would maybe be another one. And then the final kind of opposite there, or relationship between words there, attention versus authenticity, has been something that I've personally been examining a lot as I've been sharing this journey online, because from the start, my priority has been authenticity over attention. I am not incentivized to try to grab attention of viewers. In fact, as a person who prefers to perhaps fly under the radar, I am a little bit scared. And I say this lightly because I'm also not trying to take myself too seriously online, but also maintain authenticity. So I'm a little bit scared by the thought of having thousands of followers, thousands of people who have seen my face and heard my ideas and may be silently judging me on the other end. But at the same time, my sense of fear is mitigated by my commitment to authenticity and to presenting a natural human journey. And I don't want to incite value judgments and associations when I say natural, so perhaps I should just say a representation of a human's journey, a depiction of an experience. However I can make this sound objective and non-value associated. When we apply these words, these kind of opposites, these considerations to things we see in our community and on the communities of social media, as I kind of said that I have a loose belief that social media is almost its own community, we can kind of observe how these things, how these words can guide our perceptions of content, of what people put out. And by perceptions, I don't mean judgments. Let me make that very clear. To perceive something is not the same as to judge it, in my definitions and opinion here. When we examine the reasons that people are sharing, is it for attention or is it for authenticity? Is it to get attention or to share an authentic experience? Are they demonstrating intention versus encouraging impulse? Are they displaying contentment or compulsion? And I really don't want to make these good or bad, despite perhaps calling them opposites. It's not necessarily value-based. These also could be very temporary words. They also may not be reflective of somebody's life as a whole. So there are many, many, many variables here. Many things to consider, many angles of introspection, reflection, outrospection if we are perceiving things that other people have shared. That's perhaps not the right word, but hopefully you understand what I mean. Bringing it back to oneself, to myself, the final spectrum that I want to share today is the idea that I should feel guilty for my past behavior or even current behavior or future behavior versus I am not responsible. And I, again, want to emphasize that these ideas are not good or bad. And perhaps I shouldn't say I should feel guilty. Maybe I should say I do feel guilty, because I'm not trying to say one should feel anything. So I feel guilty versus I am not responsible. I do think that the emotion of guilt can be a powerful tool to help you shape your own values, guide your emotions and actions, and inform your thinking. So if you do something that gives you that feeling of guilt, perhaps that's an invitation to examine what you're doing and see if there's an alternative that would make you feel better. And does that alternative actually cognitively align with a value that you like, that you want to practice? Again, the story where I did an Easter gig and a musician was receiving a lower pay than the rest of us, and I was not able to stay and help, comes back to mind. I would have not felt guilty if I had stayed, if I'd made the time to stay and help. And when I think about it cognitively, I believe that that is the right thing to do. I don't look at myself and think I was wrong for leaving. And in my case, I was going home to a baby who at that time was a couple of months old. And so I had what could be considered valid reasons for just kind of ditching that situation. But I did feel that uncomfortable guilt feeling. And on reflection, I would have felt better. I would still feel better about it objectively today if I had done the thing that didn't make me feel the guilt. So I am using that emotion as a tool to inform the actions of my future and my values in that situation and in other situations. And then when we apply this to consumer behavior, I think it can likewise be a useful tool. If something we're doing or even observing stirs up those kinds of feelings within us, is there an alternative that we can reasonably achieve? Is there a way to absolve ourselves of the feeling of guilt without resorting to that idea that I am not responsible? Because that's the thing here. In this case, these two ideas are not necessarily opposites. It's not necessarily just a spectrum of these from one line to the other. In fact, none of these ideas perhaps are that way. But when we consider the idea that we are not responsible because we live in a capitalist society that sets everybody up to have these consumer mistakes and dilemmas and feel guilty when it's not our fault or there's not much we can do, it also leads to, I almost want to say, a little bit of behavioral stunting, where if we believe that there's a ceiling that we can't break beyond, we can't get through, then we might limit ourselves in our own capacity for growth and our own ways to mitigate our current situation in a way. And I know there's many activists who are much more accomplished in this field of mitigating this sense than I. And I take inspiration from people like that. Shelby Shellbizzle, her channel on here is all about doing your best and advocating for the rest. And it is kind of like that, where you find ways to advocate for the things that you personally cannot be responsible for. Now, I feel like I've kind of made a big muddling mess of all of these ideas today. But once again, my goal is not to present as any kind of guru in this field, but to just open up more windows for thought and reflection and community here as we share our ideas together and have little conversations in the comments below and take these things out into our wider lives, both in our own consumer behavior and our observations and interactions with others in our communities and even the communities online. And as always, I give myself food for thought with these as well. And I'm sure I'm going to receive much more food for thought from the comments. What's sticking with me at the end of this one-sided conversation with you today is the idea of romanticizing one's life and how a lot of times it's tied to things we can buy, whereas it's really not about consumer goods. It's about one's attitude. And the fact that one can romanticize minimalism, simplicity, the life of a monk is perhaps proof of this, where you can have nothing and that can be romantic. And then if we're not going to go monk mode and we're going to stay in kind of normal life mode, what is romanticizing normal life? What does that look like? How do we do that without focusing on the stuff as much as the attitude? Maybe I'll have to come back to this as a topic. As always, I look forward to reading your thoughts on this below, and I'll wrap it up there for today. Bye for now, and I will see you in the next one. And I also want to acknowledge that there's not a final landing point. When I take off my no-buy training wheels, I might be still veering all over the place, and that's not a bad thing either. I might wake up one day and be this end of the spectrum and another day be here, but I do want to have a sense of values that will guide my decisions in a way where I have more conviction about what's right for me and what's not necessary. What a journey. Hello, all you fellow travelers.